I'm Holly Goddard Jones, and I'm going to be doing a short reading from a story that I've been working on over the last several months. Um, to the extent that I can offer backstory on this project, what I'll say is that it rose out of a desire on my part to grapple with a lot of the assumptions that I've had about intelligence and the connection between intelligence and cynicism. And so for me, since my daughter was born in late 2016, and I was dealing with some post-election depression, postpartum depression, my path from there has been fighting for positivity, and that seems like a pretty timely topic at the moment. So, in the spirit of that, I wrote a story where a fairly cynical woman has her, I guess, her belief in cynicism, her comfort with cynicism challenged by a person that she meets who becomes important to her. So it's a longish story. I'm only going to read the first couple of pages, and then I'm going to finish with the Wendell Berry poem that inspired the title and that concludes the story. So here it is, Swallows. This was the year she had the job at the elementary school on the south side of town. At the end of each day, Robin would tidy the art room and prepare materials for tomorrow's projects, stab out lesson plans into the spreadsheet on the old desktop computer at her teaching station, and peel out of the parking lot with a murder podcast playing through her phone. On it, two white women of around her own age cracked wise about tragedy, breathlessly speculated about who really killed Jean Bonnet, and occasionally offered quasi-feminist maxims for 22-year-olds to get tattooed on their forearms, such as "Mace now, apologize later," and "You don't owe him shit." The rhythms of their familiar, infuriating, endearing SoCal accents, their lighthearted accountings of the world's many ills, had the perverse effect of lowering her blood pressure as she drove to the teeter for dinner fixings and, because she was a cliché, a bottle of white wine. Food preparation, for one, was a daily dismay, and 6 years of it had barely removed the sting. The key to survival for her had been not planning ahead too much and not buying too many prepared foods, and she very rarely made big comfort meals that would turn into a week of leftovers. There were few things sadder than eating, by yourself, a bowl of 4-day-old chicken pot pie. Well, except for Jean Bonnet, of course. So Robin became something of a regular at this Harris Teeter, a low-traffic location hemmed in between a Planet Fitness and a Hobby Lobby. Seagulls, confused, hundreds of miles from shore, pinwheeled above the cracked parking lot and its freight of economy cars and bench shopping carts. She could navigate the store's aisles by heart, had learned the rhythms of its sales, when to catch the Dave's Killer Bread for a still indulgent $4.99, and recognized most of its staff, including the checkout guy whose name tag read Scott, a man, late 30s, early 40s, so genuine seeming and agendaless in his friendliness, so apparently content to be scanning and bagging groceries, that Robin had reached the conclusion that he must be a little slow, or maybe differently abled was the proper phrase to use. That guess was complicated somewhat when, standing in the checkout line one day, she eavesdropped on his conversation with an elderly shopper. When Scott the checkout man's earnest interrogation on the quality of the old man's morning had earned him a reciprocal, "How was yours?" Scott the checkout man responded, "It was good. I mean, it was really good before I came to work. I got up, I read some poetry, I had some eggs and toast. I went for a walk in the woods near my apartment, and work has been fine so far, too. Thank you for asking. Thank you very much." Now, Robin wondered if he was coming on to her, if he'd seen her in line and unloaded that poetry reading, walking in the woods spiel to try to impress her. She unloaded her groceries and cast him furtive looks. What kind of hipster nonsense was he trying to spew? Read some poetry. Sure you did. "Hey, how are you?" he asked her, smiling as if she were an old friend. "I see you in here a lot, don't I?" Yep, she thought, coming on to me. Yeah, I usually come in after work, she said. He was, and she'd noticed this uncomfortably, even when she theorized he was mentally challenged, not bad looking. He reminded her a little of Amy Schumer's husband. She followed Amy Schumer on Instagram and had tracked her progression from singlehood to marriage to motherhood with cynical interest. To say she was obsessed with Amy Schumer's husband would be way too strong, but he intrigued Robin enough that she'd actually lay in bed one night reflecting on the why, and the conclusion that she reached was that he was handsome, but a little schlubby in a way that made him seem plausible, like a man Robin herself might have dated if she had done something better with her life. Not necessarily becoming a celebrated comedian, of course, but maybe not an itinerant elementary school art teacher either. The Scott guy was a slightly schlubbier version of Amy Schumer's schlubby husband. Maybe 10, 15 pounds overweight, cheeks starting to hollow, the first suggestion of what might become jowls in another 10 years. But his eyes were a startling pale blue, and he had a truly lovely smile. It was the smile, she realized, that made her doubt his intelligence. What could a smart person possibly have to smile about these days? You'd have to be a bit dim to feel that kind of happiness. Can I please see your ID? He asked, holding up the wine bottle. Sure. She fished it out. The request never ceased to flatter her. 1980, he said, the same year I was born. Really? Yep. Okay, ma'am. Do you need help getting this out to your car? It was one cloth bag of groceries, and this too seemed like a possible come on, or also like a robo line delivered by a person who lacked the mental or social acuity to recognize when that part of the employee script might not apply to a situation and therefore could be selectively eliminated. Unsure how she felt about either scenario, Robin said neutrally, It's okay, I've got it. Have a great day, Scott told her, beaming his sweet smile. She felt almost shaken in its magnitude, like he was laying something on her she didn't deserve or didn't have the fortitude to bear. She nodded, waved a little. So I'll stop there with the excerpt. And as I said, the title is Swallows, and it comes from the title, it comes from a poem in that Wendell Berry wrote. That's one of his Sabbath poems. And so the poem is part of part of the short story. It's part of the climax of the short story, and I'll read it here because I think its comment is important to both the story I wrote and to how we live in the world right now. There are reasons enough for sorrow, but best be sorrowful in spring, when the martins at last return to their houses near the porch, the barn swallows to the barn. You can't be entirely sorrowful watching the swallows flying to live and ever delighted to be flying. They know perfectly that they are beautiful, and the good is never made less good by subtracting badness from it. Um, thank you.